Introduction by Walter Russell, edited version. Man-mind must know that his power lies in the stillness of his centering self and not in the motion by means of which he manifests that stillness. He must know that his self is God in him. Seek me. Know me. Be me. All men will come to me in due time, but theirs is the agony of awaiting. These few all-inclusive words clearly state the purpose of man and woman on earth: seek me. The purpose of man and woman on earth is to seek God and find Him and her within him and herself. Know me. The purpose of man and woman on earth is to seek happiness and peace through knowledge of God. Man-mind finds happiness only in the measure of its knowledge of God and obedience to its law. Be me. The purpose of man on earth is to seek happiness and peace through knowledge of God. Man-mind finds happiness only in the measure of his knowledge of God and obedience to its law. Be me. The purpose of man and woman on earth, therefore, is to seek God, know God and be God by finding the kingdom of heaven. When man and woman finds the kingdom of heaven, he and she will know all things. That is what Jesus meant when he said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." The only way that man and woman can fulfill their purpose of finding God is by way of a series of transforming experiences occupying millions of years. Each experience of man during these millions of years gradually transforms him and her by giving him and her new knowledge of the nature of God. New knowledge renews the mind. Paul said, "Therefore, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." The only way that man can be transformed is by the renewing of his and her mind by knowing God's law. The word righteousness as used by Jesus meant balanced human relations under the law. The transformation of man and woman from the jungle to the mountaintop is a mental one. It is a slow journey, from body sensing to mental consciousness, from electrical awareness of body to cosmic awareness of the spiritual man manifesting God through the body. Gradually this transformation of man and woman has been taking place since his beginning. Time means nothing in the creative process. Man and woman takes all the time he and she needs, but he and she who gains even one moment of time in the reconstruction or the transformation of him and herself advances that much nearer to the head of his class. Therefore, it is essential that we who wish to be transformed become aware of God in us so that we may know its secrets, that we may know its purpose, that we may know and understand the play of cause and effect which it has written for you and me to manifest. Eons of time pass during which we gradually come to know our purpose. Word by word and line by line we slowly become aware of our parts in the play, but the agony of awaiting that knowledge is ours. All men will come to me in due time, but theirs is the agony of awaiting. Seek ye first, last and always the kingdom of heaven, for there is nothing else we have done since we became an amoeba, polarized in the ooze of the planet by the light of the sun, until we have reached the top of our high mountain. That is all we ever do, forever and forever, during countless lives, we just keep on searching for the kingdom of heaven within us. It is a long journey, a tremendous journey. It is the ageless journey of immortal man seeking recognition of his immortality through his mortality. When mortal man and woman finally finds his and her immortality, he and she finds that for which he and she is searching, and knows it as God. The two universes in which we live and have our being are the universe of sensing, from which we gain our information from impressions of happenings and experiences, and the mental universe from which we get our knowledge. Knowledge may come to us through our senses by transforming sensed impressions to our consciousness through meditation, or it may come to us directly from the cosmos by inspiration. Information is but a record imprinted upon the brain of how to do things, of which we know not the why. Until we know the why, we have no knowledge. All down the centuries, right up to this day, man and woman has had but little knowledge and much information. He and she has known how to produce marvelous effects, but he and she does not know the cause of those effects. We must know the cause of that which we have been cognizant of and satisfied with as an effect. To be aware of effect is to be informed of the physical nature of the universe. Everyone can be informed of the physical nature of the universe and still lack knowledge. Until he and she begins to know, he and she is still man and woman in the body, quite unaware of the kingdom of heaven within him and her. Until man begins to be inspired from the cosmos and gain knowledge directly from the source of all knowledge, he and she is still sensed man of the flesh, and his and her genius has not unfolded. Although we have reached a far stage in our search for God, we are still in our barbarian stage of unfoldment. We are still conquering, killing and exploiting our fellow men for self-profit and, in consequence, breeding fear and hate. But there is hope, for we are at the eve of a transition toward a so much greater knowledge of God. Our whole civilization will be lifted to a higher level if the seed of this new knowledge spreads fast enough to offset the seeds of old thinking and practices. We are deceived by the seeming advancement of science into believing that we are highly civilized. As long as we have not arrived at a point in which we know the nature of God sufficiently to know of our unity with our fellow man, woman, animal and nature, to make it unthinkable to even hurt another, much less kill, rob or exploit him, we are still uncivilized barbarians. We are just reaching the point where we know that we hurt ourselves when we hurt another, that when we break God's law, its law breaks us to an equal extent, that the Sermon on the Mount and the Golden Rule are not just good advice given abstractly to accept or reject as we choose, but that inviolate cosmic law lies behind them. We are just becoming aware that we must readjust all our human relations to conform to God's law or perish periodically utter degradation of our hard-built civilizations. We are actually at a point of threatened destruction of our present civilization because of having made our own law of might against right, and having practiced it in the building of our empires by forcibly taking from our fellow men that which we wanted for ourselves, and enslaving them under our lordship. We much learned that this electric universe of motion is divided into wave cycles which are equally divided into opposite expressions. Also that our actions in all of our human relations are wave cycles which must balance their actions of giving with their consequent reactions of regiving. Likewise we must learn that the giving half of each cycle must precede the regiving. When we learn to practice that inexorable law of nature fully, civilization will then progress steadily and mankind will find happiness in its resultant unity. Until that time comes in man and woman's unfolding, he and she will continually be broken to the extent of his and her own breaking of cosmic law. Our only hope of a resurrection of our dying civilization lies in a sufficiently greater comprehension of the nature of the God for whom mankind is searching to enable him and her to both comprehend and obey God's cosmic law of love upon which its universe is founded. When we learn that nature never takes anything which is not given, and that the cosmic law of love is based upon giving and regiving equally, we shall have advanced far toward our spiritual goal. Likewise, when we practice that law of rhythmic balanced interchange in all transactions between the opposites of nature, we shall have advanced so far physically that our entire civilization will be assured of its eternal continuity instead of being continually condemned to periodic destruction. Man and woman's purpose on earth is to build happiness, peace and goodwill on earth. He and she can find peace, happiness and goodwill only as he and she ceases building chaos. He and she has been building chaos and expecting his and her chaos to crystallize into a unity. That is impossible. It is incredible that man cannot see the impossibility of finding peace and happiness through practices which make peace and happiness impossible. The time has now come when man must find that the whole universe is purposeful, and that each thing must fulfill its purpose. Also he must find that purposefulness lies in the direction of law and order, not in the direction of chaos. It has taken man a long time to arrive even at this state of unfoldment where he and she now knows that greed, selfishness and disunity cannot build a stable civilization. The incredible thing is that he thought it could. Millions of years ago, he began his and her journey as an actor in this divine drama unaware of a single line of his part, learning it line by line, experience by experience, down through the ages from one incarnation to another, from body to body, from record of soul and body to record of soul and body, a continuity of life which began in the beginning for every one as an individual single cell. An individuality has kept pace with its gradual growth as each actor fulfilled his and her purpose on earth by playing his and hers part line by line as it came to him out of the dark. There is but one substance. The one substance cannot be divided into many substances, or many parts. Individuality is but an appearance, an effect of potential in the periodicity of thinking. These little rotating particles of light associate themselves into interrevolving or gyrating systems which continue the motion given to them by the energy of thinking. These systems are the records of all idea expressed in thinking. They are the living storehouses of the energy of thinking. The energy expended by mind in the process of thinking idea is not lost or dissipated by thinking. If thinking did not register itself in light and light did not integrate into the forms of idea, the created universe would not be. To rebuild new concepts of nature's workings is not easy for you, nor is it easy for me to explain it simply. For you it requires great concentration, followed by much decentration. For me it needs the power to make simple for you that which seems inconceivably complex to you. I assure you, however, that when you finally arrive at full knowing of the basic simplicity of God's creative principle you will know it in all of the simplicity in which I know it. And it will transform you by its illumining as it transformed me. The simplest of all stories is the hardest to tell when one has to tell it to the senses in words. This marvelous story we are telling you cannot be told to the senses in words. It can be told only by inspired mind to re-inspired mind. It cannot be sensed. It must be known. The story is not in the lines of words, therefore, it is in the blank spaces between the lines. These you can read only after your senses have seen the words. Pause, therefore, often enough for your mind to read the blank spaces between the words so that you will awaken the knowing which lies dormant within the still light of your consciousness, instead of only the vibrant motion of your senses which know nothing, but can remember and repeat everything. Let the noise of your vibrating senses die down once in a while and seek the silence from which that noise springs. In that way you can alone know the great mystery which is being unfolded for you here in these pages, step by step, by taking one idea at a time and telling you about it as simply as possible. The foundation of the spiritual universe is stillness, the balanced stillness of the one magnetic light of God. The foundation of the physical universe is motion, the ever-changing motion arising out of pairs of unbalanced conditions which must forever move to seek the balanced stillness of unity from which they sprang as multiple pairs of units. The purport of these writings is to illumine the road leading to eternal life by knowledge of the journey through illusion and back again to reality, taken by man in his repeated adventures in time, space and motion. In order to illumine the way it is first necessary to trace the simulations, reflections and illusions of the apparently many substances, forms and things back to their base in the reality of the one thing. Your whole purpose in life is to comprehend that law. You cannot fulfill God's law unless you do comprehend it. You cannot comprehend it unless you desire to comprehend it. You cannot fulfill your desire to command the law to work with you until you manifest your desire through action. There is no other way for you to command God's law to fulfill your desire than through the action of giving. The only lesson of your life is to learn how to give. The happiness, prosperity, peace and power that all mankind desires is summed up in the one word love, but neither of these can come to man until he knows how to express love by giving it and regiving it equally. The secret of harmonious human relations lies in a deeper understanding of rhythmic balanced interchange between opposite unbalanced halves of all transactions. Unbalance is necessary in order for interchange to take place, for without two unbalanced conditions motion could not take place at all. The perpetuity of creation is based upon the constant giving of one half of a cycle to the other half for the purpose of repeating the creative process through another cycle of giving for regiving. God will not stop these cruel wars, even though 10 million people ask it in prayer to stop them, unless the people who made them start stopping them with it. God will never do for man what man should do for himself, nor will it work for man and woman while man and woman works against its one law. Lowell Russell. That is the tragedy of man and woman. It is his and her own self-made tragedy. Unbalance, based upon ignorance of the meaning of love, is man and woman's needless tragedy. Rhythmic balanced interchange between all pairs of opposite conditions in this divided universe is the key to the attainment of man's greatest desires and highest aims, but he has not yet learned how to use it. It is your responsibility to teach him how to use it, yours and ours. Eons pass with love ever awaiting, but only a very few have arisen above the agony of awaiting and have been transformed through new knowing. That is why this simple story is so hard to tell, for the practices of man and woman's eons pull so hard toward the clay of it and the desires of its body that the very noise of its vibrant motion drowns out the ecstasy of the inner silent voice which ever awaits the hearing of inner ears. All down through the ages the whole of mankind has been uplifted just a little at a time by a very few who brought just one message to their fellow man, the message of love. And each time that message came into the world it was lifted up just a little, a very little at a time, but man in the mass has still not yet unfolded into the light sufficiently to reverse his practice of taking and substitute giving, or replace sensing with knowing. The undivided and unconditioned light of mind is an eternal state of rest. That invisible light of spirit is the equilibrium of absolute balance and absolute stillness, which is the foundation of the divided and pressure-conditioned universe of motion. In that light there is no change, no variance of condition, no form and no motion. It's the zero universe of reality. In it are all the mind qualities of knowledge, inspiration, power, love, truth, balance and law, which are never created, but are simulated in moving quantities in the divided universe of moving waves which we call matter. The light of mind is the zero fulcrum of the lever from which motion is projected. Its zero condition is eternal. The unfortunate error of science lies in assuming that the power which belongs solely to the fulcrum of light at rest is in the motion of the lever which simulates that power. That still point of desire which motivates every body is eternally present in every body. It is the soul which centers every body in the universe from giant star to a speck of dust on a butterfly's wing. Let me recall God's words, in reference to this thought, as written in its message, the divine Iliad. For behold, I am in all things, centering them, and I am without all things, controlling them. But I am not those things which I center and control. All forms are thought forms which appear, disappear and reappear forever. When one sees forms unfold from seed, and refold into seed, one sees all there is to see and to know. There is nothing else to know, for mind is the seed of creation from which all forms unfold from zero of invisibility to become visible for a time, before refolding into invisible mind. That is all there is to all philosophy, all sciences and all mathematics. Lowell Russell. Magnetism is the still light of God which centers everything as its equilibrium. Wherever you can locate the source of magnetic light, you locate a position where God is in evidence, as in the magnetic poles or the center of gravity of the earth, or the sun, or the center of a shaft in an engine. All power and force is in the stillness of the center, but the power and force are manifested by motion around the center. The center never moves, but is all power. It is the vortex of electric whirlpools which we call cyclones. It centers the positive and negative parts of a wave as the wave fulcrum. Matter is wound up into dense spheres and unwound into space surrounding those spheres. It is wound up via the poles and unwound via the equator. The winding process is electric and the vortex at the poles manifests the cyclone principle. The dwelling place of God, the light of mind, is the kingdom of heaven, and it is without form and void. In the light is the seed of creation, and the light is father and mother of the seed. In the light is being, and in the seed is desire for being. And desire in the seed is soul in the seed. The father and mother in heaven knows its idea. He, she, it knows it as one, the undivided one. In the father-mother light is the seed of all knowing. In him, her, it, is twofold desire to unfold and refold its seed of all knowing into imaged forms of its imagining, by dividing wholeness into parts, stillness into motion, unchanging into changing, unconditioned into conditioned, void into form, infinity into measure, eternity into time and immortality into mortality. The two moving lights are projected through each other from the static one to create the illusion of the idea they but manifest. I, the sexless one, am unity. The unnameable, and the one with all names, the one, the universal one, the world soul, the great spirit, consciousness, the Alpha, the Omega, God, the Creator, is the one being, the one individual, the one person, the one mind, the one thinker, the one self, the one life, the one soul, the one power, the one reality, all. God's creation is the image-patterned form of God's imagining, built in its image. It is the body of God, the record of its thinking, created by its for expressing the oneness of life, love, mind, soul and power which is in it alone. God's thinking and imagining are qualities of God's knowing. God's knowing mind is timeless and still. Stillness never can be motion, or become motion, but it can appear to be. Motion merely seems, but stillness always is. The universal equilibrium can never be other than its own balance, but it can seem to be. The illusion which is motion springs from stillness and returns to stillness. This is a universe of rest. We seemingly live in two universes, the still cosmic mind universe of knowing and the moving thoughts of mind rhythmic wave universe of sensing. The one still light of God is the cosmic light which watches over all creating things at countless points locatable by man, but invisible to man. Man and woman's senses have misled him and her into believing in a force called magnetism which attracts compass needles and lifts tons of steel. These phenomena of motion are due to electricity and not to magnetism. The cosmic light is absolutely still. It neither attracts nor repels. We now need to comprehend the nature and purpose of the magnetic poles of suns, planets and all other moving extensions of the one light. Likewise, we need to know the nature and purpose of the two electric workers which interweave this light mirage of seeming motion and dissolve it sequentially for rebuilding. This will give a foundation of knowledge to man-mind which will enable him to see behind the illusions which deceive its senses. The time has come in the history of man-mind's journey from its material jungle to its spiritual mountain top when it is imperative that it must live more and more in the cosmic light universe of knowing, and less in the electric wave universe of sensing. Man-mind must know that its power lies in the stillness of its centering self and not in the motion by means of which it manifests that stillness. Man-mind must know that the self is God in it. Also man-mind must know gradually the dawning awareness of the cosmic light of God in it. For with it comes an awareness of his and her purposefulness in manifesting the light and the power to manifest it. Man-mind must now know the universe of God for what it is instead of what its senses have made it believe it to be. Also, man-mind must know that this forever creating universe which seems so real to it is but a cosmic cinema, conceived by the master playwright. It is but an electrically projected, spectrum-colored light and sound wave motion picture play of cause and effect thrown on the black screen of image space and time. The cause is real. The effect is but a simulation of the reality. The self of man is cause. Man and woman's self-creating body is effect. God's universe of magnetic light is static. God's perpetually creating electric wave universe of two moving lights is dynamic. It forever moves. The two moving lights are projected through each other from the static one to create the illusion of the idea they but manifest. The illusion which manifests the idea of creation through seeming motion is not the idea which is seemingly manifests, the positive principle. The foundation of the spiritual universe is stillness, the balanced stillness of the one magnetic light of God. Balanced stillness is the positive principle of stability and unity. In it there are no negations. The negative principle. The foundation of the physical universe is motion, the ever-changing motion arising out of pairs of unbalanced conditions which must forever move to seek the balanced stillness of unity from which they sprang as multiple pairs of units. Behold in me the one light from which a seeming two lights appear as pairs of rhythmically interchanging opposites. These are my light messengers. They are my workers which build my imaged forms and give them back to me devoid of form. They are the pulsing heartbeat of my body, the makers of forever horning cycles of my imagining in forms of things. The two are equal halves of one. They never can become one. They forever interchange to simulate a balanced unity which they never find, for they never can be aught but two. From me one light extendeth to give form to my imaginings, and give them pulse beat to simulate eternal life in them which is in me. The other light dissolveth that form and giveth it back to me unquickened for resurrection in my rest to repeat my imaginings. Say thou, therefore, that life is eternal in man through eternities of resurrections of him and her in me. And say thou, also, that his and her resurrection is his and her own, for he and she is one with me. Thus is my imagined dual light universe born, dissolved and reborn, concentrated, decentrated and reconcentrated, integrated, disintegrated and reintegrated forever and forever in my imagined universe of imagined time and space. And, behold, each of my pairs of opposite expressions of me are reborn through me as the other one. Again I say, there is naught but rebirth in me. There is no death. Go thou and tell to man that both life and death are but mirrors of each other, which becometh each other, and their forever interpassing through each other to their still fulcrum in my knowing, from which both sprang into seeming being to record the imaged forms of my thinking. Sensing binds all things. The electric intersensitizing of the two pulsing light extensions of the one still light is for the purpose of recording thought patterns in matter. Mind knows but one idea as a whole. Thought is idea taken apart and patterned as separate idea. Thought is patterned idea electrically expressed and electrically recorded in matter by its two pulsing, interchanging lights. This universe of matter in motion is but the electric record of thought. The process of recoding is to take the one undivided universal idea apart and express it as many seemingly divided parts. This gives form and multiplicity into many seeming parts and things of a universe of but one thing. Electricity is the servant of the God mind. Electricity expresses the desire in the God mind for creative expression by seemingly dividing the one still light into transient waves of spectrum divided positive-negative colors of light. This entire universe of seeming substantiality consists solely of transient light waves in seeming motion. Motion itself is illusion. Seeming separateness. All pattern thought creations of God or man are the interweavings of the spectrum colors of the two electric opposites of light waves into the pattern designs of those thoughts. Creation might be likened to the tapestry weaver who knows the one idea as a whole, then thinks it into parts, then records those parts by interweaving their spectrum colors into the many form which, together, manifest the whole idea. The one light cannot be divided, but extensions of the one light can appear to divide it. The spots of sunlight upon the cathedral floor are many, but they are all extensions of the one light of their source in the sun. Likewise all mankind is an extension of the one idea of man, for man is but one in the light of his source. Likewise all moving extensions of the one still light, are manifested in the white light of suns and the black light of their surrounding space, are but extensions of one source. All idea is still. The cinema exemplifies this meaning. Upon the screen are many patterned ideas in noisy, violent motion. We know, however, that all of the motion of separate ideas, and all of the sounds emanating from those patterned, moving forms, would instantly cease if the still source of light from which these images and sounds are projected were turned off. We know that the cause of all this transient division into positive and negative effect is in the one still light from which it is projected. We know that the sounds we hear emanate from that stillness, yet we seem to be totally unaware of the fact that all of our pulsing universe is but an extension of one still light of universal mind, projected through positive and negative light upon the universal screen of space. It is difficult to conceive Earth and all of its phenomena of motion, sound, people, animals, and plant life, as a motion picture projection from our sun. Yet all of the separate ideas of Earth are in that one incandescent light of the sun. All are but one thing, light. For I say that man and woman who senses but clay of earth in him and her is bound to earth as clayed image of his and her earth. Clayed images of my imagining who knoweth not me in them are but dwellers of earth's dark. To sensed man the doors of my kingdom are self-barred by darkness until the light of me in him and her is known by him and her as me. Until then he and she is but moving clay, manifesting not me in him and her while sensing not but moving clay of him and her, knowing not the glory of my light in him and her. Wherefore, I say to thee, exalt thou thyself beyond thy sensing. Know me as fulcrum of thy thinking. Be me as deep well of thy knowing. Desire in mind is electrically expressed. Electricity is the motivative force which projects the one light of mind two ways to create cycles of light waves for the purpose of expressing thought cycles. Images of my imaginings which grow from earth, and those which freely move, all of these things grow and move through extended light of my dynamic thinking until they themselves can think with me. Desire is not in the brain. It is in the centering conscious self. Desire is the cause of all motion. For I am a patient God. I patiently await awakening man. Awakening man is he and she who knoweth the light of me in him and her. Man may choose his own eons for his and her awakening, but know me he and she must. Until that day man's agony of unknowing shall be man's alone. His and her knowing must be his and her own desiring. This still fulcrum is thus the source of the holographic light projection of the Universal One. It is described in Aboriginal culture as dreamtime. In Vedic culture as the Satchitananda state of Brahman. In Taoist culture as Wuji, meaning the primordial universe. In Jewish culture as Ein Sof. In Hellenic and Christian culture as the hypostasis. In modern philosophy as the absolute. The ancient cultures knew of this primordial universe and its fundamental connection to the world of matter, but cosmology now puts this knowing also into the realm of science. God's only purpose in creating His whole universe of bodies is to express His one idea of love, as manifested by it in giving and regiving by every opposite mate in nature to every other opposite mate. This fact we must thoroughly understand. If we thoroughly understand it, we can then know that the solution of all of life's problems lies in our knowledge of how to manifest that love principle. That is all that life is for. We have just begun to learn its lessons. When we do understand it, we will then know what matter and motion is, and why God created matter and motion. We will then understand that love is law, the one and only law in God's universe, the one divine law. We will also realize that love is power, the only power in all the universe. With that knowledge we can use that power and command that law to work with us, for we will then know that God's law is our law. Mind multiplies its power to uplift mankind to higher cultural levels when it is engaged in peaceful pursuits which promote friendliness. The body of man does not live, and having never lived it cannot die. The spirit alone lives. The body but manifests the spirit, mind of man and woman is but beginning to know the light. We actors of the play must, therefore, be content with the lines of the play revealed to each of us in light. We must, likewise, be ever joyous at our continuous transformation, as each one of us learns our part, line by line, the better to fulfill it worthily. All parts of the play are experiences which become the action of the play. All man's experiences are part of its unfolding. Each experience is a part of man-mind's journey from the unawareness, dark, to the awareness, light. All experiences are steps in that journey to man-mind's mountaintop of glory. All experiences, therefore, are good experiences. There is naught but good. There is no evil. There is naught but life. There is no death. There is only life. All love. There need be no mystery as to whether light is corpuscular or wave, for waves of motion which simulate the light and darkness of space is all there is. Corpuscles of matter are one half of wave cycles of light. Space is the other half. Light is all there is in the spiritual universe of knowing, and simulation of that light in opposite extensions is all there is in the electric wave universe of sensing. Together these constitute what we call matter and space. It has been difficult to conceive light as being purely corpuscular, for light is presumed to fill all space. Space is not empty. It is full of wave motion. Corpuscles of matter are one half of wave cycles of light. Space is the other half. The light and motion of solid matter, and of gaseous matter of space, differs only in volume and condition. Water of earth is compressed into small volume while water of the heavens is expanded thou sands of time in volume. Each condition is the opposite half of the cycle of water. Water vapor is water turned inside out. It again becomes water by turning outside in. Expansion-contraction sequences result from this process. Light only seems to travel. It is but one more of the countless illusions caused by wave motion. Waves of the ocean seem to traverse the ocean, but they only appear to do so, for waves are pistons in the universal engines, and pistons operate up and down. Wave pistons of light, or of the ocean, operate radially and spirally inward and outward, toward and away from gravity. Waves of light do not travel. They reproduce each other from wave field to wave field of space. The planes of zero curvature, which bound all wave fields, act as mirrors to reflect light from one field into another. This sets up an appearance of light as traveling, which is pure illusion. The sunlight we feel upon our bodies is not actual light from the sun. What actually is happening is that the sun is reproducing its own condition on the earth by extending the reproductions out through cold space into ever enlarging wave fields until those reproductions begin to converge again toward our center of gravity into ever smaller wave fields. The heat we feel and the light we see is dependent entirely upon the ability of the wave fields to reproduce the light and heat, and that ability is conditioned upon the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. Light cannot be seen, it can only be known. Light is still. The sense of sight cannot respond to stillness. That which the eyes feel and believe to be light is but wave motion simulating the idea of light. Like all things else in this electric wave universe, the idea of light cannot be produced. Electric waves simulate idea only. They do not become idea. We cannot sense the idea of a harp while it is still, but we can know the idea of the harp. We can know its various possibilities of expression, even though its strings are not vibrating. Likewise, we can imagine countless complexities of rhythms which lie unexpressed within those still strings. For ages man has thought of matter as being substance. Posterity must learn to think of matter as motion only. All down the ages the mystics have affirmed that the universe is but illusion, and that there is no life, intelligence or substance in matter. They are only half-truths, though. Kepler's first law is not only a half-truth, but the half that is stated is inaccurately stated. Science should be exact, not approximate or inferential. Just as Newton left out all consideration of the equal and opposite reaction to the attraction of gravitation, which is the repulsion of radiation, so does Kepler leave the other focus of his ellipses out of his consideration. Scientists ignore nature when they choose, or when mathematical formulae work out in accordance with preconceived premises. The cardinal error of science lies in shutting the Creator out of its creation. This one basic error topples the whole structure, for out of it all of the other misconceptions of light, matter, energy, electricity, magnetism and atomic structure have grown. If science knew what light actually is, instead of the waves and corpuscles of incandescent suns which science now thinks it is, a new civilization would arise from that one fact alone. Today's civilization has advanced far in knowing how to deal with matter, but we do not know what matter is nor the why of it. Nor do we know what energy, electricity, magnetism, gravitation and radiation are. For centuries, science has been searching for the why of things in matter and does not seem to realize that the why is not in matter at all, nor in space. Space is as much matter as planets are, but of an opposite form, potential and purpose. There is something beyond the matter of galaxies and space which the senses cannot fathom but the consciousness can. This revelation of the nature of light will be the inheritance of man in this coming new age of greater comprehension. Its unfoldment will prove the existence of God by methods and standards acceptable to science and religion alike. It will lay a spiritual foundation under the present material one of science. The 8 corner projectors of the universal radar broadcasting stations, where motion begins its projection into space to simulate mind idea, nature is a series of echoes. All things are answerable in light. The universe is a tonal one, a dimensionless universe of light. All nature is a series of orderly tonal periodicities of the one force, assembled into the complex idea of thinking mind, and registered in light, or matter, or energy in interchanging potentials, all of which are variable, yet comprehensible and measurable states of motion of the one substance. God is love, unexpressed. God's creation is love expressed. God's love is changeless unity. God's creation is its imagined division of its unity into pairs of changing opposite units, multiplied to infinity, for the purpose of manifesting the power of love through interchange between opposite pairs. In this two-way universe, light which is inwardly directed toward gravity charges mass and discharges space. When directed toward space it charges space and discharges mass. All direction of force in nature is spiral. Man's knowledge is like a deep well of still water. Its thinking is like a two-way pump which divides the quality of that stillness into quantities of parts and sets them flowing. Knowledge of cause can never be acquired from motion. It can be acquired only from the source of motion. Lau Russell. The undivided light of knowing is cause. The divided light waves of thinking idea into thought bodies is effect. Every effect in this universe, every happening, every event and every experience takes place only between divided bodies which are oppositely conditioned. A lever, for example, moving upon its fulcrum, expresses the idea of power by motion, but the idea of power is in the still fulcrum source of power. It is not in the moving lever. The lever would be both powerless and motionless if it did not have the fulcrum from which to extend the simulation of power. The printed poem is not the idea expressed in the poem. That printed poem has no meaning to anyone whose intelligence is insufficient to reflect the idea from the composer's mind to his own. No idea of mind ever becomes matter. Imagine God's hands pulling the invisible one idea of father-motherhood apart to divide it into two visible forms, each of which are one half of the one idea. Instead of the invisible, formless and changeless one idea, God has thus created pairs of oppositely conditioned halves of many ideas. That is what is called polarity, which means the division of one condition into two equal opposites. God's sole occupation is the building of moving body forms to simulate his one idea of cause and effect, which creation is. All cause lies within the unconditioned, balanced, magnetic light of mind knowing. All effect lies within the two unbalanced, polarized lights of electric thinking, which create the two unbalanced and opposed conditions which creation is. Electric thinking divides all effect into opposite pairs equally. Each one of each pair of effects is equal. Their balance is absolute. As man and woman unfolds from sensed man to spiritual man and woman, he and she gradually becomes aware of the two-way motion of all effect, that two ways being the visible effect which responds to his and her senses and the invisible effect which he and she knows but does not sense, nature's method of growth. Everyone is familiar with a motion picture projection machine, and its method of projecting series of pictures so fast that the illusion of motion is created. Everyone knows that these pictures seem continuous only because they change so rapidly. If the film is turned very slowly, however, you can see that there are blank spaces between each picture. In nature, those are the rest periods where the next picture of any unfolding idea changes. The man-made motion picture has but few changed pictures each second, but nature's thought wave pictures change over 700 billion times a second, which is the speed of thought. Lowell Russell. Father-mother principle of building bodies by dividing light into polarized units. Note that the male and female both co-create with a positive charge, but their polarity is different. There are 2 points of rest in every cycle. At each of these 2 rest points, each opposite condition reverses and becomes the other. Day is a contraction of light waves into visibility. Night is a reversal of the cycle. Light waves expand and become invisible. The name of that great divider of rest into two-way electric motion is polarity. Polarity is the controller, the measurer, and the surveyor of electric intensity of desire in mind for the actions-reactions needed for creative expression. Out of my light of knowing are my 2 lights of thinking, born as sexed pairs of opposites for repetition as sexed pairs of opposites. Again I say, I, the light, am one. But my thinking is 2, for thought is 2 in every repeating thing, 2 halves of one which never can be one. Always must they be 2 to go opposed ways from me and back again to me for reborning from the other one after finding rest in me. Science sorely needs the imagination of an artist or poet to synthesize its heterogeneous complexities, and put it on the path of simplicity and truth, for nature is very simple in its causes. It is complex only in its repeative effects. I have not said that Newton's laws were wrong, for they are right as far as they go. Inspired man alone can create enduring things. To create we must first conceive. To conceive we must stop thinking and know. All sensing must cease. There is no power in thinking, we must become one with God to conceive idea in order to produce the form of that idea. A concept must precede its manifestation in form. The product of idea is not the idea it simulates. Idea is cosmic and cannot be produced in matter. Idea must be conceived in the mind before it can be simulated as product. Conceptions belong solely to the magnetic God-light and never become matter. Knowledge is the foundation of man's concepts. Thinking transfers concepts into product. Do we meditate with our mind or our brain? We meditate with our mind. There is only one mind, which is God's mind. God's mind is the one knower, the one thinker. The reason you think that you have a separate mind of your own is that the thoughts you think are the ones stored in your brain as memories of experience of your own body, or of your own thoughts. God's mind motivates those thoughts which you think of as your own. You could not think except for the motivating power of desire in you. Walter and Lau Russell. When we learn that nature never takes anything which is not given, and that the cosmic law of love is based upon giving and regiving equally, we shall have advanced far toward our spiritual goal. Likewise, when we practice that law of rhythmic balanced interchange in all transactions between the opposites of nature, we shall have advanced so far physically that our entire civilization will be assured of its eternal continuity. Man and woman's purpose on earth is to build happiness, peace and goodwill on earth. The happiness, prosperity, peace and power that all mankind desires is summed up in the one word love, but neither of these can come to man and woman until he and she knows how to express love by giving it and regiving it equally. All down through the ages the whole of mankind has been uplifted just a little at a time by a very few who brought just one message to their fellow man, the message of love. And each time that message came into the world it was lifted up just a little, a very little at a time, but man in the mass has still not yet unfolded into the light sufficiently to reverse his practice of taking and substitute giving, or replace sensing with knowing. God's only purpose in creating its whole universe of bodies is to express its one idea of love, as manifested by it in giving and regiving by every opposite mate in nature to every other opposite mate. This fact we must thoroughly understand. If we thoroughly understand it, we can then know that the solution of all of life's problems lies in our knowledge of how to manifest that love principle. That is all that life is for. We have just begun to learn its lessons. When we do understand it, we will then know what matter and motion is, and why God created matter and motion. We will then understand that love is law, the one and only law in God's universe, the one divine law. We will also realize that love is power, the only power in all the universe. With that knowledge we can use that power and command that law to work with us, for we will then know that God's law is our law.